Welcome to the Enterprise GTM podcast, hosted by Tim Zonka and Vidya Raman. Each episode takes a deep dive into how to successfully maneuver the unique dynamics of enterprise go-to-market while candidly discussing successful approaches, pitfalls, and failures alike. Our guests are seasoned company founders, GTM execs, technology buyers, and end users. Please note that the views expressed by individuals in these podcasts are not to be treated as investment advice. They are also not representing the views of their employers, current or previous.
All right, welcome to yet another edition of the Enterprise Go-to-Market podcast. Today, Tim and I are excited to have Leslie Venetz with us. Leslie, it's super duper exciting to have you. Why don't you start off by giving an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. So thanks for facilitating this conversation. A little bit of background. I grew up in B2B sales, so spent about 15 years as an individual contributor, player coach, frontline manager, senior sales leader. I've made over 250,000 cold calls myself. So folks, I have walked the talk.
Wow, that is a lot.
I know, right? Wow.
It's so funny.
I'm not sure I have made 250,000 calls, period. Forget cold calls.
For ages, I was saying that I'd made 100,000 cold calls. I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Colin Mitchell, and he said, I'm surprised it's only 100,000. Have you really done the math? And I was like, no, I just sort of took a stab. I knew it was at least that. And then I started doing the math, thinking about my initial jobs in high school when I was making cold calls and including all of the nonprofits that I've done fundraising cold calls for. And just if you lump it all together, easily 250,000. So yes, I have done the job that I know many of our listeners are right now. I have been there. I know the phone fear. I know the hesitation. I know how badly, we want to get it right out of the gates. And so I'm so excited to dig into all of that. And that's also what inspired me to leave corporate just about 2.5 years ago and make my side hustle where I was doing some training sessions. I was doing some one-on-one coaching with founders into my full-time job. I focus a little bit more up channel. I'm more of a Series B focus right now with my clients who have established sales teams, but I still have some early stage clients. And frankly, I keep them because I think that what happens at that seed, pre-seed Series A is so fun. It's the combination of these big bets that are being made while also having to just dig into the minutia of creating repeatable processes. I love that combination. So I'm super excited for this conversation.
That's awesome, and completely agree with what you said, especially on the early stage. So Tim and I have listened to quite a few of your podcasts and really loved how insightful and specific you are about so many vital sales topics, ranging from, like you said, cold calling to the role of marketing, understanding and leveraging buyer intent, how to think about events from a sales standpoint, what top sales performers are doing in 2024, and so much more. And we will jump into some of these topics today. And I'll just say this to our audience at the very outset, that while Leslie's target audience for her consulting work and some of the content that she's put out is geared towards companies that have revenue in the $15 to $50 million range, having listened to several of her podcasts and having been a fan of her work in general, I can assure them, our founders, that most of what Leslie shares is super duper relevant for founders who are leading sales themselves. And I think founder-led sales, which is usually the norm for early stage startups, can be so much more effective if only founders could better understand some of the foundational aspects of sales. So with that in mind, let's dive in. So the first topic that we wanted to bring up with you, Leslie, is active listening. So this seems like a topic that is very, very close to your heart. You've mentioned how you almost always insist on starting your sales training for your clients with sessions on active listening, and that you also get pushback on doing so. So tell us a little bit about active listening and why is it important in sales? And I'm assuming that's an area that many people tend to be deficient in. So tell us a little bit about that.
Gosh, I think humans in general are deficient in active listening, right? I feel like it's a skill that all of us could benefit from improving. And that's particularly true if you are selling. I feel like in sales, there is this like perception that the best sellers are the ones that talk the best. Like you'll often hear people say something along the lines of, oh, I have the gift of gab, so I would be great at sales. And what I've found is that that's quite the opposite, where if I'm interviewing somebody and I ask them why they want to be in sales and they say I have the gift of gab, that's a mark against them and not for them.
Wow.
But if they say things like, oh, I practice active listening, I lead with curiosity, I strive for a deeper understanding, those are the traits that I really crave in great salespeople. So a couple things. One is that often folks perceive active listening as something that they're good at or not good at. And I would argue that listening, like so many other sales skills, is a skill. And if it's a skill, that means it's something that we need to invest in, that we need to deliberately practice, and that we need to strive to get better at in a way that is maybe a bit more processed than folks might initially think, right? Because just listening doesn't just listening to sales calls or listening to prospects doesn't mean you're going to suddenly become a better listener or a more active listener. So it's something that I really encourage folks to view as a skill set and practice. I teach a framework, a 4R framework, and one part of it is resist. And it's where I see people having these aha moments during the training sessions. And of course, we're resisting the urge to interrupt, but what we don't think about is that we are resisting the urge to rent space in our head to the thing we're going to say next. Because now we're not fully paying attention to the speaker. We are resisting the urge. This is one I'm very guilty of. We are resisting the urge of sharing our own relatable story.
Yep.
Because that puts the spotlight on us and it takes us off the speaker. So we're resisting all of these behaviors, or I bet folks will really identify with this one. We're resisting the urge to jump in and help when really we shouldn't be going into that helper mode or sales mode. We should be resisting and asking more questions and striving for that deeper understanding first. So I just love that you started with this, especially when we're having a conversation, because I think first, view active listening as a skill, which means that you need to practice it. And second, show up to all of your conversations with the mindset that your goal isn't to talk. Your goal is to listen, ask questions, and develop a deeper understanding before you've earned the right to, have something relevant and valuable to say to the prospect.
Leslie, one of the things I totally subscribe to the active listening thing, and the best sales teams that I've worked with, you see them do it, regardless if they quantify it or think about it that categorically, or they're just good. And the best sales teams that I've been on, I think we as a sales team really push that. However, I find that it's hard to get, even for sales reps or sellers who understand the value of that, there's this urge to I gotta have a point. I gotta have a show that I'm going to be valuable here. And if I only listen, how do I get into the listening mode? Do you have any guidance for how to flip that switch so they could have just enough to get the right to then listen and ask questions?
Yeah. So there is this woman, Jill Conrath. I don't know, have either of you read any of her books?
Mm-mm.
Radical Candor?
No, that's Kim Scott, who I'm
sorry.
I'm so
Okay.
obsessed with.
Yep.
Folks can't see this because we're not live, but I got asked to pre-read Kim Scott's new book. Real pinnacle moment for me in my career. Jill Conrath is an OG sales professional, really one of the first women in sales that was out there publishing books. She has a book called Snap Selling, where she talks a lot about how frazzled our customers are. And she gives a challenge to the reader that after a discovery call, after an introductory call, the prospect should have gotten so much value that they would have been willing to pay for the call. And I think, Tim, that speaks to your question that yes, our job is to listen. Our job is to ask super smart questions so that we have enough of an understanding that when it is our turn to speak, we can deliver tremendous value. And the way I always suggest people deliver that value is in some sort of non-obvious insight or actionable insight. Especially for like early stage founders, you probably chose to launch this company because you're passionate about the product or the service you sell. And you probably have some sort of expertise in that arena. At the very least, I guarantee that you are out there talking to your peers, your colleagues, maybe folks that aren't quite prospects, but also are maybe like academics or experts in the space. So you have a tremendous amount of knowledge that your prospect probably doesn't have access to. So listen first, get that deep understanding. And then when it is your turn to talk, lead with that like insight that you're able to bring that they wouldn't have visibility to without you. That's such an important way to add value to calls.
That is amazing. So in order to do what you just mentioned, Leslie, I'd imagine that some of the, obvious prerequisites here would be that founders really, really prepare themselves very, very well before these calls, like understand the industry, the broader trends in the industry that the prospect is in, the company specific aspects, as well as try and glean as many insights as possible from the prospect's social media and all these other things. So when it is their time to open their mouth and add that value, they would have all that context. So it isn't something that they just make up on the fly. I mean, they may have to make it up, but it's based on all that deep understanding and context that comes from that preparation. That is super insightful. Thank you.
I think that's very true for preparing for discovery meetings or that first introductory meeting, that it is your responsibility to earn the right to your prospect's time. And the way to earn the right to their time is showing up prepared. I would put in the caveat, because I would assume a lot of folks are outbounding or trying to generate leads through some sort of outbound sales motion, that you do not need to do all of that research before you start outbounding. Look for trend lines. So look for the trends that are going on in that industry or going on with the customers they sell to. Certainly look for trends that would be applicable to that persona. And that should be enough to get you started on your cold outreach. Save the deep, deep dive research for before the discovery call, and that will just help you better manage your time.
Leslie, so this is a great segue to the topic of cold emails. As far as prospecting is concerned, you mentioned a few times already, you talked about earning the right to asking a question or an interaction with a prospect. What do you mean by that? What does earning the right to the prospect's attention even mean?
So earning the right is something that I came to, throughout my 20-year career, that I looked at what really worked for me again and again, despite the persona I was selling to, despite if I was selling a product or a service or what the price point was, what was the sales cycle, like what were the things that were true in all of those different types of environments. What was always true was the importance of earning the right to that prospect's attention, to their time, to their consideration. So the gist of it is just asking yourself, what have I done to expect this prospect to read this email? Because that's an ask. We are asking them to spend their time reading an email from us instead of doing something else. Or what have I done to earn the right to ask them to sit on this discovery call with me? Or maybe, talking about the research, like how am I preparing for this call to earn the right to their time and earn the right to ask for next steps? So I think it's a really powerful litmus test to remind us that it is a buying cycle as much as it is a sales cycle.
So, Leslie, in your current role especially, you probably review hundreds, if not thousands, of cold emails that your clients are writing to their prospects. And I'm sure you have some amazing insights about what works and what doesn't. So let's start with the most common type of outreach that you see out there. Tell us what that looks like and why that doesn't work.
Okay, so the biggest mistakes I see folks making in cold email are writing really long emails, writing blocks of text, and using really complicated language. And I will be the bad guy here. I don't care who you're selling to. I do not care how smart the person is that you're selling to. Using big, complicated words is not going to get you the replies that you want on your email. And here's the brain science. So thinking again about that frazzled customer, everybody that we are reaching out to is getting dozens, if not hundreds of emails a day, right? They're not reading the email that you sent. If you are lucky enough to get an open, they are scanning it. So we want to do everything that we can to reduce the cognitive load or reduce the mental load and make it easy for them to scan and digest that email. So best practice for cold email right now, less than 100 words, one single point. So that means, folks, no bullet points in cold emails. I know it was a hard day for me. They had to rip those bullet points out of my hands. But under 100 words, a single point, so no bullet points, and that means a single call to action. You're only asking them to do one thing to make it easy for them to take that action. And you are trying to write between a 3rd and 8th grade level. I personally aim for grade 5. So I'm writing simple, short emails with simple, concise sentences. And that's going to make it much easier for somebody to digest your email when they scan it and then take the action that you're prescribing. So that's one big area that I'd start with.
Wow, that's amazing. So many specific ideas there. Less than 100 words, no bullet points, writing at 3rd to 8th grade level, ideally 5th grade. Gosh, looks like I could employ my daughter pretty quickly to write some of my cold emails. Can't wait. Let's talk about the messaging itself here, Leslie. So what are some of the key components of what a highly relevant message looks like?
So one thing I would start with is that we often hear, or maybe you're like new to writing cold emails or new to sales copywriting and you've gone to Google to see what best practices are. You're still going to see a bunch of stuff about subject lines. What I'm seeing is that subject lines are now considerably less relevant than the preview text. And this is true because most emails are, again, being scanned and we're trying to reduce the cognitive load, give them a reason to open it. Most emails are being looked at for the first time on mobile. And now a lot of them are being looked at for the first time on Apple Watches.
Oh, wow.
Which is just kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah.
So your preview text is the first 30 to 80 characters of your email, and that includes the subject line. So it would be subject line, hi, Vidya, whatever those opening words are. So what I would really challenge the listeners to do is go audit their emails that they're sending out and make sure that in that first 80 characters, they have said something that matters to the reader. What doesn't matter to the reader is my company does X. I am the founder of Y. Our technology does Z. You have to make it relevant to them by focusing on the benefits they will get, by sharing that non-obvious insight, by bringing some sort of value to them. And I would say my other tip that is an easy audit that you can do with your emails is audit them for I, we, our language. So if you are doing a lot of I, we, our language, that is very writer-centric writing, and we want reader-centric writing, which is you, they, them language. So aim for a 1-to-3 ratio of I, we, our to you, they, them language. And if you're really struggling to figure out how to bring that to life, Google voice of customer in sales copywriting or voice of customer in B2B emails. And that'll give you some tips on how to incorporate those mini case studies and using your customer's voice to convey value without having to say, I think, or I found.
Wow.
And Leslie, what's your take on, especially for emails, but I think it comes in other communication, is founders, especially technical founders with, engineers or engineering background, CTO kind of founders. This isn't, I think, 100% true, but I've experienced that there's a decent portion of that population that I've worked with where they're just they don't understand why, they are great at reading and they are great at understanding detail and they can hold tons of it in their head all, at one time. And so sometimes it's almost like their tolerance for world needs to be a better place than this. We should be able to have a dense email, which people should it's not rare to encounter that. What advice do you have to a founder who has that disposition? And then, there's, I think the reality that you're suggesting is look, you want to break through to earn the right to give them all of that to some serious work to do. Any advice for how to appreciate the other side or to get there?
Yeah. Okay. So first, a level set. For my clients, the primary ICP that they're reaching out to right now is a senior IT persona. So the copy that I'm writing is primarily going out to that like CIO, CTO, CISO persona. And the data shows that writing long emails to that specific persona does not work. So like I am speaking to that exact persona. I have the data. But I'll carry your words forward, Tim, that it is about earning the right to send the longer email. It's not that you're never going to send those denser, longer emails, but for your initial outreach, you are a stranger. They do not know you. They have no reason to give you their attention. So it's not about whether or not they have the capability. It's understanding that they are getting dozens, if not hundreds of emails, and that asking at first blush for them to that like dense email, it's just too big of an ask. It's not the right play. What I might suggest to technical founders that want to lead maybe with something that is a little bit more value based instead of just like, here's my 3-sentence, 60-word email.
Yeah.
I love doing a play. 2 renditions of it. First is the subject line is publication, then colon topic. So that might look like Reuters, colon resilient, Wall Street Journal, colon supplements. And then what you are sharing is publication that you didn't write, something external that you found really valuable that you think they will also find really valuable. You're running a bit of a risk, including a link in your very first email. So maybe if you can hold that back to email too, because you do want to give those 2 domains a chance to talk first, just so you're making it into the primary inbox. But I think that's an incredible way to deliver value. Another variation of that play is to pull out something very specific from like a lengthy white paper, a lengthy report, and put just that excerpt into an email. And again, you're sharing an external resource, you're sharing value, sharing that non-obvious insight. And so it's something that speaks to that like very intellectual mind, but you're removing a lot of the friction by telling them exactly why you think they would find it valuable and pulling out something very specific for them to get a little taste of that value. I also love using PS in those emails so that the body stays really short, but then it's PS, you can read the full white paper here. PS, here's the link to the full article.
I love it.
That makes sense.
I also love how this would reduce the cognitive load on the person who's reading the email while at the same time delivering value and giving them the option to dig deeper by providing that additional information in PS. Everyone else, I'm sure, has maybe quite a bit exposed to AI-enabled personalization of emails. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think it works? What are some good approaches to using AI for personalization, or is that not something that you feel like is working?
Oh, it's so bad most of the time. It's like, it's really, really bad.
All right. That's a good response.
So here's my take on AI is that it, at this point, is assistive, not replacive. And if you were trying to use it to be a completely replacive, you're probably going to fail. I think we are close to the evolutions that will allow it to be slightly more replacive. Here's how I wouldn't use AI. There are a lot of tools out there that are offering to like circumvent limits on how many emails you can send or how many LinkedIn connections you can send. I would never recommend using those types of tools. Focus instead on writing really, really good copy. And I see this a lot, particularly with early stage founders, because they get this like boil the ocean mindset. And I get it. We're talking tam all day. And so it's hard to like come down the funnel to like, okay, what's my actual addressable market? And when I have conversations with early stage founders about how many deals they actually need to do, it's like 12 or 27 or 8. And then I'm like, so why are you trying to reach 10,000 people? So
true.
Don't use AI to like scale to the moon.
Yeah.
You don't need it. I would take more of a quality over a quantity approach. Don't use AI that gives you personalization that sounds like you're just reading the news back to your prospects. I'm so enamored with what you have done in the sales space, Tim. Right? Like it sounds
Yeah.
generic, sounds cheesy. And if we think back to optimizing for preview text, you've then said nothing in those first 80 characters that makes somebody want to learn more because you've just read the news back to them. And I would also say, don't use AI that sounds like way too complimentary, because that's sort of the evolution I'm seeing, is that they'll pull out something really specific, which is so cool that they can find a specific webinar or podcast I did, but it sounds very much like it's written by a robot, not like a
And
human.
cheesy too, right?
And so cheesy, so cringy. So use AI in ways that allow you to replace like low value, low risk, mundane tasks, like updating your CRM, for example, or like I have AI bots on all of my calls that help me write my follow-up emails, that help me put my proposals together. So stuff like that that's deeply assistive is amazing. Don't use it for those times where you should be really indexing on human connection.
Leslie, one of the common threads I've noticed in a lot of, at least the guidance you've provided so far this call, is almost helping people watch out for themselves, or like avoiding common temptations, like avoid the temptation to have emails that do sound like this, or avoid the temptation to interrupt when you're trying to really actively listen. So I want to continue down this line. Another thing, and this is true from startup, founders and really small early startups all the way through, global public B2B companies, is like, just show them the demo, like get to the demo. And there's this urge that like the demo is this be all end all, or it's like, it's a key requisite. And I think a lot of times it comes too early, or there's a strange crutch that it doesn't necessarily deliver some of, I think, the meaning or the power that people believe it has. So what are your reactions to that? Where do you see something like, the quote unquote demo, its role, and when do you bring it into a process in a responsible way that I think respects things like active listening and some of, I think, the other things you promote that are easy to, just skip because you got to get to the demo?
Yeah. Oh, that's such a smart question, Tim, because I think it so deeply depends on the type of sale, like the type of product service that you are selling. If you are selling with a PLG or like a freemium motion, you're going to want to demo a lot earlier. Like if you have your pricing on your website, you're going to want to demo a lot earlier. I think when to demo is about when it's appropriate to add a little bit of friction to the process. So if you are trying to drive primarily a self-serve motion into your funnel, and maybe later there's going to be a land and expand play, you want to demo pretty early, to the extent that you probably want to have like a 5-minute demo on your website where people don't even have to interact with you to be able to get some of that surface level information. You want to remove as much friction as humanly possible. If you are selling something that is more complex, is a higher price point, particularly if it's something that involves a larger buying committee, I would deeply encourage you to try to push the demo to a second call, meaning your first call, the discovery call, is just about uncovering the needs, uncovering the corporate priorities. How would this type of purchase align to those corporate priorities? Who else is going to be involved? So that when you go into the demo, you don't find yourself in that really tough position trying to talk about every feature and every advantage, that instead you can focus on those 2 to 3 core benefits that your product would deliver. And then it's even more complicated if you sell a service, because often there isn't something to demo. Like I spent a huge amount of my career in like the business intelligence and research space. And sometimes it was a platform as a service play where we could show them the platform that had the research. Sometimes it wasn't even that. Like we really just had to, focus on a deep understanding of the intangible benefits that they maybe could get, which is an incredibly hard sale. So at that point, you want to hold back those like demoing elements even further, so that when you do tell them why they should buy from you, you're super sure that you're getting it right.
Let's continue on the avoiding the temptation thread. So another area where I think you have some really great points of view is around objection handling. And I think one of the temptations that I heard you touch on there is, an objection comes your way and you're ready to go get it. So talk a little bit about how like to approach objection handling.
Yeah, thanks. Because I think I have a slightly unpopular opinion, or maybe it's like a new age opinion on objection.
That's
So,
the way to market it. It's
right.
the next generation.
My take on objections is that we should be grateful that we hear them, which I'm probably like, people are just feeling stabbed in the heart, betrayed right now. What do you mean, Leslie? Grateful for an objection? Here's why. We didn't hear the objection. The alternative is that they were either going to lie to us, not say anything, and just sort of like tacitly lie, or maybe just hang up on you. So hearing an objection is a win because it means that the door is open to continue the conversation. The approach I teach for objection handling is a 3C approach, and it starts with leading with curiosity. And it's a win if you're able to continue the conversation. And why it's a little bit unpopular maybe is that still so many sales leaders teach that there's only one win, one positive outcome after you hear an objection, and that's to tackle it, to smash it, to overcome it. I don't think that that's true. I think that that's a great outcome if you're able to find like a mutually agreed to path that gets you on the other side of that objection. But other wins are learning more about the organization, learning about their buying timelines, learning maybe if there's somebody else you should be talking to instead. Maybe it's learning about your pitch or learning about the industry that you can use it on future conversations. Maybe the win is that you discover that your product or service is actually not right for these people and you have an opportunity to refer them somewhere else. So my take is greet it with gratitude, greet it with curiosity. If you're able to continue the conversation, that's a win. And that the win is going to be varied and nuanced. And it's not always going to be, okay, we've reached this mutually agreed to conclusion that gets us on the other side of the objection.
You mentioned something early in the answer. I forget the phrase used. It was like an objection that's maybe more tacit, like a lie or dismissal. You also talk a little bit about the kind of objection that comes in the package of, sounds great, send me some information and I'll look at it offline. And sometimes I think the optimists and founders I've heard, great, like they want to learn more. And really, I think you, at least I've heard it in some of your language, like you see that as a tacit objection. So what's your take on push through something like that?
Oh, golly, you're so right. So there are two primary types of objections we're getting. One is the bucket of real objections. Like those are not objections so much as they are, here's a challenge, let's solve it together. And the other bucket are the false objections that we are getting earlier in the sales cycle. And those are brush offs. And you're so right that one of the most common ones I hear is, sure, go ahead and email something over. This is an objection, folks. Do not email anything over. It is an utter waste of your time. They're never going to read it. They're probably going to delete it, maybe block you so that you can never email them again. So instead, a couple of scripts that I recommend folks practice when they hear an objection like, sure, send something over is, yes, and when I see that email, what are the top 1 or 2 points you'd like me to address? Yes, sure, happy to do that. What would you need to see in that email for it to be worth responding to? So if you take that like curiosity, continue the conversation approach, it's not about overcoming the objection so much as exploring what would make an email worth sending. And what I find is that if somebody's willing to dialogue with you, it rarely ends in sure, just send something over. It instead ends in like mutually agreed to next steps.
It seems like it's a good way of smoking out. Like, is this person for real, or do they have a list of what they care about seeing? I like that.
And especially for early stage founders, y'all are busy. Like you do not have time to spend. And I know that most of you care deeply. So you're not going to just pop off an email. You're going to sit there and you're probably going to obsess over a little bit, edit it 2 or 3 times. You do not have the time to spend an hour sending an email to a prospect that doesn't actually want you to email them. So it does take a little bit of courage. It does take a little bit of putting yourself out there and being vulnerable to push back with that curiosity when you hear an objection, like, sure, just send something over. But it is such a better use of your time to smoke out whether or not this person is just BSing you on the call than to send the email and then chase on the email and then rent space in your head to whether or not they're ever going to respond to the email and open it up in Salesforce or whatever. So to have the conversation on the phone, it's better to get that fast no than a slow maybe.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for saying this, Leslie. And I just want to, for our listeners, just underscore this is the textbook definition of qualifying your customers. So yes, please do take the opportunity to do that.
Kind of shift gears a little bit and ask about something I've struggled with. This is when I was CEO and had to figure out in a small startup how to spend my money in the right way. Run marketing departments at all startups and kind of pre-IPO companies is events. I think it's another area where I've been surprised at how successful they've been when I started being suspect, and then when times where I thought that they were going to be great, they were failures. So how do you, especially for smaller stage companies, how do you, any advice around events, and especially from a sales perspective, like how can people use those in a smart way and decide if they should show up, and if so, what to do to make the most of the investment that they spend?
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do when I'm supporting clients is blur the lines between demand gen and lead gen, or between marketing and sales. And I think events is a perfect way to do that. So 2 thoughts. Thought 1 is, if you are showing up to an event and the mandate you've given your people is go sell, you are doing it wrong. Events are an incredible opportunity to build connection, to understand needs, and to set up next steps where you're actually going to sell. But forcing your sales reps to try to hard pitch people that walk by your booth, it's a turn off for everybody. It's just not the right play. My second thought is, my favorite thing that I'm working with clients that are doing a lot of events, both their own events that they're hosting, but also external events that they're paying to attend, and is event-led outbound play. So if you follow me on LinkedIn or TikTok anywhere, you'll hear me over and over again talk about the importance of a multi-channel approach. And so those channels are usually going to be social, email, and phone. And for events, I would suggest viewing an event as the 4th channel. And it's one touch point in your entire outreach sequence. So you're still going to start it with the emails, the LinkedIn touches, the phone calls. And the goal is to set up a meeting at the event. And if that happens, great, your sequence is done. If it doesn't happen, that's not a problem. You can still try to go to that person's speaker session or meet them at a networking reception and just say hello, get that FaceTime, and then you continue the sequence afterwards. If you don't meet them, no big deal. You still have your sequence to continue afterwards where you can talk about the shared experience that you just had. So I think one of the big fails is that people view events as this siloed activity. And then the only correspondence that people get afterwards is maybe a generic blast from marketing. Mm-hmm. And it's a real missed opportunity to build the event as a single touch point amongst 3 to 4 total touch points, or not total touch points, but total channels on a multi-touch sequence.
Just to tease out, as a marketer, I've heard, the idea of sequences and the sequence makes a ton of sense, but there's something about the way that you articulated it as a point in a longer conversation that you're trying to engage your customer on, that it's nuance, but it's a powerful nuance that I think you brought to that. So yeah, that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah. And it makes the marketing team happier when sales treats events this way, when it's collaborative, when the sales team is going because it's the marketing team's budget. Usually it's not even the sales team's budget. So use it for the reasons that demand gen would work, which is awareness, credibility, rapport building, relationship building, and you're going to get better results.
Yeah, absolutely. Leslie, so let's jump into the final section of this podcast. So this is an exciting rapid fire true or false set of questions. And you can, feel free to give a short response after a true or false. Are you ready for it?
I am as ready as I'll ever be.
All right, so let's jump in. So the first question is about AI-enabled tools. So the statement for you to respond with the true or false is going to be, AI-enabled tools will dramatically improve every aspect of prospecting customers. True or false?
True?
All right. So what's the reason for your hesitation?
Every aspect, gosh, it's so hard to say. Like things I'm super bullish on are like AI role playing, tech.
Mhm.
I think that's going to be just incredible. I'm super excited about how much easier it's going to be to get signal-based data, to do research so that we're reaching the right people at the right time with the right message, and it's super relevant and valuable to that. I'm excited about all of that. I'm deeply worried about how people are using AI to do more of the bad stuff at scale, and how that is going to continue to tarnish the reputation of sales as a profession. And I'm very, very worried that legislation will not keep up with AI. So I'd love to see more use of like AI avatars and AI call bots, but I think that there should have to be a disclaimer that somebody's talking to AI and not a person.
Completely agree with you on that. The next question is also AI related, or the statement rather, which is AI enabled tools will completely transform enterprise sales end to end 3 years from now.
3 years from now. Yeah, I want to say yes. Hopefully
All right.
optimistic. Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. All right. So the next one is one of your favorite topics, cold calling. So the statement here is cold calling will continue to be effective 3 years from now, just as it is today.
Yes, 100%.
All right. Love both your optimism about AI and as well as cold calling. All right. So the next one here is about in-person events. So in-person events, the statement is in-person events will be less relevant in the future of enterprise sales than it is today.
The opposite.
It's going to be more relevant, you think?
Yeah. I think for two reasons. One, with the amount of AI that we're going to be using, I think for the really big deals, I'm talking like 6-figure plus deals, in-person meetings will continue to be and maybe increasingly will be a very important part of the sales of the buying cycle. And what I'm also hearing from the community, that they are craving micro events. And so these are not the big conferences with the booths and the trade shows. Then, we're not selling people. There are these opportunities to gather like with your peers, with your colleagues, with the ecosystem, which includes sales professionals, to talk about the things that matter most. I think that they will be even more relevant and will be craved more by our prospects in the future.
That makes total sense. And the last question here, Leslie, is that PLG and bottoms-up adoption will continue to be strong complements for outbound sales in the future.
Oh, yeah. I think, yes, we're going to see more subscription models in all parts of our life, B2B, B2C. So yes, I anticipate that the artist formerly known as freemium, aka PLG, will continue to be a really strong business model for folks.
Awesome. Well, Leslie, this was such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for your time. Really loved having you on our show.
My pleasure. Thank you both so much for having me.
Thanks, Leslie.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Enterprise GTM podcast. Subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts so you'll never miss an episode. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on your favorite podcast platform so we can continue to help enterprise founders thrive.